Hello and welcome to the new video from the Create Your Own 2D platformer game with Unity. In the previous part of the series, we created our player and gave him the ability to move around the level. Today we'll be giving him the ability to jump and even double, triple or quadruple jumping. So let's dive into it. Okay, first of all, I've just made some changes to our setup. I just removed the canvas and added new sprites or new images I created with Photoshop, and then adding them as single game objects to Unity, and then re-adding all of our rigid body and colliders and our script again. That's only to have a firmer grip of the gravity to our player while returning back to Earth after jumping. Okay, so now we head to our player control script. First of all, we'll be creating a public float, and we will call this float jump force. After that, another public float, which will be called check radius. Then we will be adding a private integer, which we will be calling jumps. Then a public integer, and we'll call this one extra jumps. Sorry for this. We'll be calling this extra jumps. After that, we will be adding another public, but this time we'll be adding transform, and we'll call it ground check. Then public layer mask, and we'll be calling this ground. And finally, we'll be adding a public bool, and we'll be calling this is grounded. Okay, now we head to our start function, and in the start function we'll be setting our jumps to be equal to the extra jumps. After that, go into our fixed update, and then we'll be typing is grounded equal to physics 2D, which is a kind of physics system which is integrated to Unity. And after that, dot overlap circle, and between two brackets we'll be typing ground check dot position, and then a colon, and then we'll be adding check radius. After that, we'll be adding ground. So this will help us to check for our ground later. Then in the void update, we'll be typing if is grounded is equal to true, we want our jumps to be equal to extra jumps plus 1. After that, we'll be adding another if function in which we'll be adding input dot get key down, and between two brackets we'll type key code dot space. Okay, here we will just type the key our player has to press to jump. Then we'll type and our jumps is greater than 0. Now we want our player dot velocity to be set to equal a vector2 dot up multiplied by our jump force. Then we'll be typing another if function. This time we'll be adding input dot get key down, and between two brackets again key code dot space. This must be the same key you selected earlier, okay? And it doesn't have to be space. After that, and our jumps is equal to 0, and our is grounded function is true. We want our player dot velocity to be equal to vector2 dot up, and also multiply this by our jump force. Okay, so here we want to add another line, which is our jumps minus equal 1. So this will decrease our player's number of jumps by 1 each time he jumps mid-air. Okay, so a quick recap on the code. Here we added our public float, which is the jump force, or the force we want to apply to our player. And here we add our check radius. We will discuss this in a minute. After that, we add our jumps value. Here we add our extra jumps, which are the allowed jumps our player can do while in mid-air without needing to return back to the ground again. After that, we'll be adding a public transform, which is a ground check. So we tell Unity that if this part is touching ground, we want our player to be grounded. Now in the start function, we set our jumps to be equal to our allowed jumps, so that our player in the start of the game has the same number of jumps as at any certain frame during the gameplay. And then in the fixed update, we tell the game that is grounded is equal to physics 2D dot overlap circle, and here between two brackets we type our ground check dot position, in which again we set the position of the player's legs. After that, the check radius or the radius of the checking circle, and then it will be checking for ground. Then finally, in the update method, we type that if our player is grounded, his jumps must be equal to extra jumps plus 1, which is a start jump. And after that, if the space key is pressed and our jumps is greater than 0, then we want to decrease our jumps by 1, and then we want our player to jump. So we multiply his y velocity by our jump force. And then again, if the space key is pressed and the jumps is equal to 0, but our player is on the ground, we want him to be able to jump again. So now by saving this and returning back to Unity, we need to create a new empty object, and we'll be calling this ground check. And then we'll add just an icon to be able to see it, locate it in the scene. Then reposition this to the legs of our player, and after that make it a child of the player. And then we drag that game object to the ground check space in our player's inspector. After that, we want our check radius to be equal to 0.5. Then we head to our ground, and in layers we choose ground. Now ground will not be shown to you, so you have to add a layer and then create one and call it ground. Then press enter and head back to your platform and then choose ground. Now by heading back to our player, in the ground drop down menu we choose ground. Okay, now if we play, you'll find that now by pressing the spacebar our player jumps easily, but there's a small problem here which won't be obvious now, so we need to duplicate our ground by pressing Ctrl D and then resizing it just a little bit to look like platforms, and then by positioning different copies of this in the scene, I will just add another one here, and finally one here. Now we'll see that if our player jumps, he's stuck to the side of the platform, and it's not something we want him to be doing. We want that if he didn't reach the platform, he falls. So to solve this problem, we'll go to our assets and then create a physics material 2D. Now we name this player material. Now in the friction, we want to write 0. So there won't be any friction between our player and the ground. Now back to the player, and we drag this material to the collider materials. Now by returning back to our game, you'll find that if our player did not reach the top of the platform and just hit the side of it, he will then slide down and will not be stuck to the side of the platform. Okay, and now by adjusting our extra jumps value, for example we write 1, you'll find that in the mid-air, if you press space again, your player jumps once more. Now this is the end of this video. If you learned something new today, don't forget to like and share the video. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be able to continue with us in this series.